At the beginning of the movie, we see a girl named Ashley on a video call with her friend Natalie. They're discussing books about the history of Ashland Falls, the town they live in. Natalie tells Ashley that her mom found one of the Ashland Falls related books in her room and completely lost her mind. She even made her return the books to the library right in front of her. Ashley then says that her theory about the town might be true. She believes the borders of Ashland Falls have shrunk over time. Just as Ashley is about to explain further, there's a knock at the door. She quickly hides the books under her bed and tells the person to come in. Natalie, surprised, says Ashley just told her no one else was home. Suddenly, there's another knock. Ashley cautiously opens the door but finds no one outside. She steps out to check, and in the distance, we briefly see a figure near the window. Something Ashley doesn't notice. She comes back inside and shuts the door, but the knocking happens again. The scene cuts to black.
Like, comment, subscribe to Recapss Horror.
Next, we see a family touring a house. The real estate agent Bonnie tells Chuck that the house they saw earlier was the same price but only half the size of this one. Chuck remarks that it sounds like a red flag, but Bonnie explains that the house has been on the market for 3 years, so the price is negotiable. We're then introduced to Maria, Chuck's wife, and Isabelle, nicknamed Izzy, Chuck's sister. Bonnie congratulates Izzy on receiving a scholarship. Chuck mentions that since the house is spacious, she'll have plenty of room for her art, and asks if she still practices it. Izzy appears hurt by the question, and Maria clarifies that Izzy received the scholarship for her art. With this starts Chapter 1, Chuck. The movie will be divided into chapters, each focusing on a different character and telling the story from their perspective. Let's begin with Chuck's chapter. The story opens with Chuck calling Bonnie to complain about a water leak. Even though she had recently gotten the roof repaired, he takes photos of the damage to send her. Bonnie asks him to check Maria's studio as well, but there's no leak there. We learn Maria is into styling and stitching and runs a YouTube channel. Her studio has an old mannequin named Martha, her only keepsake from New York, which Chuck clearly dislikes. While inspecting the house from the outside, Chuck is approached by his neighbor Larry. During their conversation, Chuck mentions the leak, blaming last night's rain. Larry casually brings up the house's history, telling him that the previous owner had died by suicide. Later, when Chuck looks back at the pictures he sent Bonnie, he's startled to notice a gun in one of them, something that wasn't there when he originally took the photo. The next morning, Chuck spots Martha standing outside the house. Shocked, he calls Maria to look. Maria is equally stunned to see the mannequin outside. Chuck steps out cautiously and moves toward Martha. Just then, Larry shows up and Chuck tells him what happened. Chuck suspects Izzy might have done it. Larry, concerned, asks how Izzy is doing mentally. He mentions knowing about their mother's car accident, something Maria had shared with him. He warns Chuck that this town has a history of suicides and people struggling with depression seem the most vulnerable to her. Chuck asks, "Her?" Larry simply advises him to keep a close eye on Izzy, leaving Chuck confused. He then suggests Chuck visit the town library to learn more about its history. "Friends of gardening are welcome," he adds, leaving Chuck even more puzzled. The scene shifts to Chuck at the library, browsing books on Ashland Falls history. He suddenly notices a stack of books placed in the middle of the aisle, ones that weren't there moments ago. Then he runs into Ashley, who looks visibly distressed. She warns him not to read the books and begs him to leave town. When Chuck asks her name and if she's okay, she tells him, then repeats softly, "Please, just leave." Ignoring her, Chuck heads to the counter to check out the books. The librarian named Molly asks if he's searching for Forest Road. Confused, Chuck says he's never heard of it. She explains that everyone who checks out those books thinks they'll find it, but no one ever does. Chuck then mentions Ashley and the mysterious book stack. Molly reacts with visible alarm. As he leaves, Chuck notices a bulletin board with a banner that reads, "Friends of Gardening." Back home, Chuck begins reading the books when the doorbell rings. It's Olivia, his first piano student in town. During the lesson, Chuck realizes she's a beginner. He heads to the kitchen to get her some water, but suddenly hears the piano being played skillfully. Just then, he's shocked to see Olivia standing in front of him, visibly scared. she says. There's a woman at the piano. Chuck hurries to check, but finds no one. As Olivia leaves, still shaken, she says, "The woman started playing. I didn't see her face," and quickly walks away. As Chuck closes the door, we briefly glimpse a woman inside the house. Later, Chuck attends the Friends of Gardening Club meeting, where he finds Larry. Chuck mentions that Maria is out of town. Larry tells him this group discusses things the rest of the town avoids. "Have you seen her?" Larry asks. Chuck replies, "Seen who?" Larry simply invites him to sit. The group begins talking. Molly shares that book stack in the library have started reappearing. Another man comments that no one has died by suicide in a while. But with Ashley's return, it feels like another bad wave is coming. Terrence then introduces Chuck to the group and says, "You must be wondering what this meeting is all about." He explains that everyone here has been affected by her, either through loss or personal terror. Another adds, "The dreams are the worst. They don't stop." The group begins discussing leaving town, but Terrence says it doesn't help. "She stays with you once she's in." Chuck, overwhelmed, finally asks, "Who are we talking about?" Terrence replies, "Helen Foster." On asking who she is, Terrence tells him that Helen is the source of the town's suffering for decades. That's why the meetings are kept secret. The town avoids speaking about her. People are scared. Molly says it can't be stopped. Another argues it can if they find Forest Road. Larry adds, 825 Forest Road. It's where Helen is said to have lived in the 40s when she killed herself. They then discuss this address doesn't exist now. No body can find it. Suddenly, Larry senses something. He quietly gets up and steps away and spots Helen's ghost. He silently returns to his seat. Terrence notices and announces they should end the meeting. Everyone leaves in fear. As Chuck exits, he hears ghostly voices. Curious, he checks the chapel and sees Helen sitting there. She laughs and turns her head. With this starts Chapter 2, Isabelle. The story flashes back to the day Chuck's family first came to see the house. Izzy heads upstairs to check the rooms. As she steps into one of them and switches on the light, we see Helen in the corner, then vanish in an instant. The scene cuts to Izzy, saying she's unsure about moving here with Chuck and Maria ever since they arrived. She's been having unsettling, vivid dreams about her mother that feel too real. Just then, Chuck walks into the room. Izzy tells him that Dr. Lewis suggested she keep a daily journal of her thoughts and feelings until she finds a more local therapist, so she's been recording voice memos to let her thoughts out. Chuck notices one of her drawings lying nearby. It's a sketch of their new house, but Izzy insists she drew it a long time ago. We also learn that in the past, Chuck had left both Izzy and their mother behind to move to another city for a better life. Something that left a lasting scar on Izzy. While leaving, Chuck asks Izzy to help unpack some of the kitchen items the next day. They recalls how their mother used to stack all the bowls and dishes in a pyramid, and leave a note saying they wouldn't put themselves away. Chuck leaves the room, and the scene cuts to Izzy dreaming about her mother. She jolts awake and hears Chuck calling out to Maria, telling her that Martha is outside. Izzy steps out and asks what's going on. Maria tells her the mannequin is in the yard. Izzy, confused, says, "I didn't put it there." She then goes outside and sees Chuck talking to Larry. Frustrated, Chuck grabs the mannequin, muttering that Izzy must put it there. She insists she didn't, but he walks away without saying a word. Chuck returns from the Friends of Gardening meeting and finds Izzy at the piano. She asks where he's been, pointing out that Maria is out of town, and he didn't answer her calls. He casually mentions the club. Izzy, visibly uneasy, says something feels off in this town. She tells him that a girl from her school, Ashley, died by suicide the night before. "Things are happening," she says, "and I can't tell what's real anymore." She mentions her friend Luke, who believes the town has an effect on people. Chuck gently asks if she's ever had thoughts of self-harm. Izzy admits her heart hurts every day. She hates feeling this way. When Chuck asks if her doctor prescribed anything, Izzy snaps back, offended that he assumes she wants to be medicated. Chuck tries to comfort her, saying she needs to stop blaming herself for their mother's death. It was a random tragedy. It could have happened to anyone. Izzy admits she's in pain. Chuck responds, saying he's grieving too. She reminds him that he distanced himself long ago, so much that even his wife doesn't know he has a sister. She walks away, leaving Chuck in silence. The next morning, Luke arrives at Chuck's house. Izzy quickly takes him to her room. Izzy tells him. Chuck went to some gardening meeting. Luke scoffs. They don't talk about gardening there. He explains the town has long been rumored to be haunted. Years ago, a man hanged himself in the library using a rope and a stack of books. Since then, people claim to still see that same stack in the aisle. Just then, Maria enters and asks Izzy if she's been in her studio. Izzy says no. Maria leaves without another word. Luke continues. It all ties back to a woman named Helen Foster, who lived here half a century ago. Her daughter was severely bullied at school, and despite Helen's efforts, letters to the school, and even the bully's family, nothing stopped it. Her daughter eventually took her own life. Helen spiraled. She lost her job, was about to lose her home, and then snapped. Killed the bully and their parents, then shot herself. Izzy asks, which house was hers? Luke says, no one knows for sure. The only clue, an address, 825 Forest Road. But it doesn't appear on any current map. Izzy asks if no one tried to find it. Luke explains that the town's old maps have been sealed under court order since the 1950s. The town council was supposed to vote on unsealing them, but the vote never happened. Izzy asks, the 1980 council meeting? Luke nods. No one knows what happened. When the meeting was about to start, the room was locked. Witnesses say the council members were inside, along with one lone woman sitting in the audience. One evening, Izzy and Maria visit an art studio where they begin to bond. Maria reveals that she has a sister she's not close to, though she watches her live streams. She also shares that she has bipolar disorder and takes medication for it. Through their conversation, it becomes evident that Chuck doesn't take mental illness seriously. Suddenly, a girl screams. Moments later, an announcement is made that the gallery is closing. When Izzy looks at one of the paintings, she sees a ghostly figure standing in it, and the painting is quickly covered. Later that night, while Izzy is asleep, the light in her bathroom turns on by itself. She wakes up, switches it off, and returns to bed, but the light flickers on again. Annoyed, she gets up, switches it off once more, and removes the bulb, placing it aside before going back to bed. Suddenly, the light turns on again. This time, Izzy is terrified. The bulb is still lying next to her. Just then, she sees Helen emerging from within the room and jolts awake, gasping for breath. She looks around and finds the bulb still on the side table. Later, she shares the incident with Luke. When Luke asks what she wants to do, she says she wants to find Forest Road. Luke immediately refuses. He says people believe Ashley and her friend were also looking for Forest Road, and after that, strange things began happening to her. Eventually, she took her own life. Just then, Izzy gets a call from Chuck, urgently asking her to come home. When she arrives, she finds Maria crying. Chuck tells Izzy to start packing, saying he'll be back shortly. Izzy asks if he's going to look for Helen Foster's home. Maria, confused, asks, "Who is Helen Foster?" The scene cuts to Izzy packing when Luke shows up. Izzy tells him she's moving to campus because something is clearly wrong with the house. Luke notices a photo of Izzy's mother and says he just met her mom. Izzy is shocked. Luke insists it was her who opened the door for him. Izzy reveals that her mother died in a car accident a few months ago. Luke is stunned. Suddenly, they hear glass shattering somewhere in the house. They rush downstairs to check. Luke panics and bolts out of the house. A chilling voice calls out to Izzy, "Isabelle, it's Mommy," followed by laughter. Scared, Izzy slowly moves forward. Just then, Maria tries to stop her, but Izzy pushes ahead. The voice continues, "These dishes won't put themselves away," and laughs again. It says, "Don't you want to see what you did to me?" Suddenly, Helen reveals herself. Terrified, Maria and Izzy run. Izzy locks herself in her room, only to hear Maria screaming. And with that, Chapter 3, Maria begins. The story opens with the family house hunting. Maria jokes that a house this big and cheap might have bodies in the basement, but the broker insists it's old yet structurally sound. Later, Maria waits near the car for Chuck, the same day he visits the library. In the car, she asks about his sudden interest in Ashland Falls history, but he avoids the question. Their conversation shifts to Izzy, with Maria defending her, revealing that Izzy was driving during their mother's fatal crash. Chuck dismisses therapy, believing only medicine works, but Maria pushes back, saying that's just his opinion, not fact. Then Maria is seen talking to her sister over the phone, struggling to adjust to small-town life after living in the city. As she leaves the room, Helen's reflection appears in the mirror. Chuck, meanwhile, reads from the library books and tells Maria that in 1953, all the town's street names were changed and its borders redrawn. Their house was originally listed as 15 Rose Lane. In the kitchen, Maria finds the dishes oddly stacked with a note on top. They won't put themselves away. She chuckles and tells Chuck to remind Izzy to clean up. Later, Maria heads out in her car, listening to a news report about Ashley's suicide. Distracted and unsettled, she receives a business call. As she reverses, Helen is seen silently watching her. Maria is then seen live streaming. She briefly leaves the studio to show some fabrics in another room, but when she returns, she's startled to see the mannequin Martha has shifted position. She adjusts it and heads to Izzy's room to ask if she had been in the studio. This overlaps with the scene where Luke is telling Izzy about Helen. When Izzy says no, Maria returns and resumes the stream. The next scene jumps to the day of the art gallery visit. Back home, Chuck asks how it went. Maria explains the gallery abruptly shut down. Some paintings were covered, and everyone was told to leave, as if there were a bomb scare. The next day, Maria is live streaming from her studio. Behind her, the mannequin Martha subtly moves its hands.
You're still watching? Good. Like, comment, and subscribe to Recapss Horror.
Though Maria remains focused on the stream, she gets a call from her sister Ally, who regularly watches her streams, but she ignores it and continues. Martha's hand moves again. When Ally calls a second time, Maria addresses her in the stream. The mannequin's head slowly turns behind her. Thinking Ally is calling about the bridesmaid dresses, Maria starts showing them. Suddenly, she gets a text from someone named Claire, urgently warning her to get out of the house, only to realize Martha is no longer in the room. Just then, a loud noise startles her. Scared, Maria steps out and heads toward Izzy's room. There she finds Martha standing motionless until its head moves and turns. Horrified, Maria runs away in fear. Next, Chuck and Maria are seen burning the mannequin Martha. Afterwards, Chuck questions if Maria is taking her medication. Frustrated, she snaps that she is and reminds him that thousands of people saw it move during the stream. She accuses Chuck of dragging everyone to this small town for his own redemption. Izzy walks in and finds Maria in tears. This is the same scene where Maria asked about Helen Foster. The story continues as we hear Izzy and Luke talking upstairs, while Maria enters the kitchen and once again sees the dishes stacked up. But this time, the note reads, "Hello, Maria." Alarmed, she turns to leave, but we see Helen behind her, and the dishes crash to the floor. Helen calls out Izzy's name, smashes more dishes, and hums eerily, terrifying Maria. Helen says, "I know you're there, Maria." Just then, Maria sees Luke leaving the house. She tries to stop Izzy from entering the kitchen, but Izzy goes in anyway. The scene cuts to both of them rushing upstairs. Izzy runs to her room, while Maria locks herself in hers. Suddenly, the door opens. Terrified, Maria hides behind the bed. Helen laughs, and then she haunts Maria. Maria screams, and Helen lunges at her. Moments later, Maria enters into Izzy's room, hugging her tightly. Izzy asks what happened to her face and takes her to the mirror. Maria's nose is bleeding. With this, Chapter 4, Forest Road begins. We see Maria lying sick in bed, with Chuck sitting beside her. As Chuck steps out of the room, Maria suddenly opens her eyes. Soon, Luke returns, holding an old town map, which he shows to Izzy and Chuck. He's figured out how Ashley managed to find 825 Forest Road. Apparently, after 9050, all the street names and even the town's map were changed. The town was also geographically shrunk. But the town council forgot to update one crucial thing: the city's power grid map. By following the old power lines, they were able to trace the real location of 825 Forest Road. Chuck decides to check it out, and Izzy insists on coming with him. Just then, the doorbell rings. It's Bonnie, who's there to film a customer review for her real estate firm's promotion. Chuck tries to send her away, saying Maria isn't feeling well. But surprisingly, Maria, now dressed and composed, agrees to do the shoot. Then she tells Chuck to go look for Forest Road, which shocks both Chuck and Izzy. because no one had mentioned Forest Road to Maria. Izzy requests Luke to stay at the house and look after Maria. Meanwhile, Chuck and Izzy leave to find Forest Road. Back at the house, Maria begins staring at Luke and starts behaving oddly. As the interview begins, Bonnie asks her to start with her name. Maria says her first name, but when asked for her last name, she repeats the first. She then suddenly starts talking about her daughter. Bonnie looks confused. Maria never had a daughter. She tries redirecting her, asking her to stick to the review, but Maria continues talking about her daughter, and the story she tells eerily mirrors Helen's daughter's tragic past. The bullying, the ignorance, and the horrific end of her daughter's suicide. It becomes clear that Maria is now fully possessed by Helen. Meanwhile, Chuck and Izzy arrive at the end of Forest Road, where the road disappears into the forest. They then continue on foot. After walking a bit through the woods, they finally spot an old, abandoned house and go inside. Chuck asks Izzy to look around for anything that confirms they're in the right place. Izzy goes upstairs, and Maria's voiceover begins. "I didn't want to hurt anyone. I had written letters to Clark's family, describing everything my daughter was going through. That should have ended it, but it only got worse." Just then, a door creaks open. Izzy cautiously approaches it, and someone quickly passes behind her. The scene cuts back to Maria. Blood starts dripping from her nose, and we get a brief glimpse of Helen's face on camera. At the same time, Chuck discovers a hidden letter, the same one Helen had written to the Clarks, the parents of her daughter's bully. And this is where the biggest twist of the movie is revealed. The house at Forest Road wasn't Helen's house at all. It actually belonged to the Clark family. Helen's real house was 15 Rose Lane, the very house where Chuck is currently living. Shocked, Chuck runs to find Izzy and sees her standing in front of a door. Meanwhile, Luke confronts Maria, asking, "Who is your daughter?" She replies, "Mary." He asks, "Where's Mary?" Maria screams, "Dead." She suddenly lets out a deafening scream, forcing everyone around to cover their ears. Then Helen reveals herself, laughing sinisterly. Panic erupts and people try to flee, but the doors are locked. She kills Bonnie and videographer. Luke hides near the dining table, only for Helen to appear from the other side. Back in the forest house, Chuck cautiously approaches Izzy. Suddenly, a ghost places its hand on Izzy's shoulder. Chuck rushes to help her, but despite all his efforts, the ghost pulls them both into the room, and the door slams shut behind them. What exactly happens to Chuck, Izzy, Luke, and Maria isn't shown explicitly, but it's heavily implied that all four were killed. And with that, the movie ends. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the chills, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a scare. Until next time, stay spooky.